The gang wars in Chicago trace all the way back to the 70s and 80s, and the demolition of many of the project buildings that contained the formerly well-organized BD and GD strongholds left younger members displaced without leadership. So over the years, gangs in Chicago became less concerned with moving as a unit and running a centralized criminal enterprise, and more concerned with the day-to-day instances of violence on their blocks. Many famous murders had taken place in the 2000s and early 2010s that caused tension between the smaller sets running the streets. The first of which relating to this story is the murder of Jaro that saw the formation of Jaro City in 2005. But Jaro's rivalry with 600 arguably sparked a couple of years after the death of Jaro, before 600 was even formed as a gang. On the 21st of September 2008, a Jaro City affiliate called Hottie, real name Rodney King, was shot and killed in the 400 block of 62nd Street. Jaro City would use the name Hottie World in his honor, and the murder of Hottie would become connected to the older members of 600, who at that time would have still been primarily claiming the gang Brick City. However, younger members would apparently be present for this murder. In 2014, 600 Breezy would tweet how he had witnessed the murder of Hottie firsthand, placing him at the scene of the crime. However, it was the founder of 600, d-thang, who would be labelled as the suspected shooter in the murder of Hottie. Whilst many have considered d-thang to be responsible for this murder, including members of Jaro, there's also been alternative theories. Much later, during a Facebook Messenger discussion with an unknown fan, one of d-thang's big brothers, 600 Trigger, would claim that d-thang actually had nothing to do with this murder, as he was too young at the time and had not yet gotten involved in the streets. There were also members of Jaro who denied d-thang or any other op having been involved in the murder of Hottie, but such denials are common in the gang world, as admitting that your friend might have been killed by your enemies is considered by some to be an admission of defeat. Because what we know now, based on a police report from 2011, is that at that point in the time, Jaro City and Brick City, later known as 600, had been at war for approximately 3 years, with the implication being that the war was officially started with Hottie's murder in 2008. And over the course of those 3 years, there would be numerous acts of violence between these two warring factions, but it would be on the 17th of July 2011 that a deadly incident of violence would go down, taking this war to the next level, and sparking a chain reaction that would see 600 becoming one of the most infamous gangs in the city of Chicago. In early Sunday morning on the 17th of July 2011, Baldy, real name Marcus London, and a few other guys from 600 were walking down South Prairie Avenue in 600's neighborhood when someone approached and opened fire. Baldy ended up getting shot in the head, whilst another unidentified man got shot in the ankle. That night, Baldy was driven to the University of Chicago Hospital, later transferred to Mount Sinai Hospital, where he would remain in critical condition until Tuesday the 19th. Baldy was placed on life support, but essentially left brain dead, and the machine was just keeping his heart beating during this time. Baldy's friends and family ultimately chose to pull the plug and end his life support, when he would unfortunately succumb to his injuries and pass away. Huncho Hoodo, whose birth year matches that of one of the witnesses in the Chicago PD's incident report for the murder, would later talk about the incident in the song Sun Don't Shine, saying how Baldy got killed right in front of him. 600 Breezy would also recall the incident in a DJ Vlad interview, where he described how he was walking right in front of Baldy when the shots started firing, and saying how he was so close to being shot himself in the head that one of his dreads flew off, and had Baldy not been there behind him, it could have just as easily been 600 Breezy who was killed.
I done been to points where I done had my dreads shot off, bro. Like, my homies killed right next to me, behind me, all that. You know what I'm saying? Like, my homie Baldy got killed, he was standing behind me. So if he wouldn't have been behind me, that bullet hit him in the head, would have hit me. Because his height, it would have probably came through.
Tay600 recently had an interview with the Articulate Thinkers podcast where he shed more light on Baldy's murder, explaining that 600 member E-Day was on the block with Baldy at the time he was killed, and that E-Day carried Baldy himself into the car and took him to the hospital.
When Baldy got killed, when he got shot, they was all on the block. When he got hit in the head, E-Day was the one like carried him, picked him up, carried him to the car. So E-Day got all this blood on himself from dealing with Baldy when he first got shot.
Tay would go on to explain that Baldy was the first person from 600 to get killed on their block.
Like, man, Baldy had manager, bro. Baldy is the first die from my block.
Yeah, so man, that's crazy.
At this point in time, you know, this ain't like me getting this call later on down the line or now. He the first some like this happened to at this very point.
So despite there being instances of violence in the area before this, and things started with the murder of Hottie in 2008, the murder of Baldy ended up becoming the inciting incident that would harden the hearts of many 600 members in the streets. Members of 600 would be heartbroken about the loss of Baldy. While Chicago police would struggle to find Baldy's killer, many of 600's enemies would later seemingly hint at being responsible for the hit, including members of STL and MOB. The infamous female shooter KI would later allegedly be killed by O Block's King Von, would actually tweet about the situation a year after Baldy's Baldy's death, saying that it was her gang that made Baldy World. However, in 2013, on the exact date that Baldy died, beans from MOB would seem to hint that his gang were responsible. In 2012, he would even post a meme on Facebook making fun of Baldy, where he had tagged both KI and Scrap from MOB, perhaps implying that they had both been behind the hit. Also, Buki from MOB tweeted that MOB invented Baldy World. Driller from 051 would also credit MOB for the killing and praise them for making Baldy World. MOB would even seemingly admit to killing Baldy in their vlogs.
What'd you tell her ass? What'd you say before that?
600K, we kill a little boy.
Before that?
That be like baldy.
Like Lil Baldy.
Like little baldy.
Boom, boom, baldy.
Hey, nah.
He make them hits though.
I'll make the hits.
He can get a hit done though, quick.
If it wasn't for me, the hits wouldn't be hits.
I got. He wanna go to Baldy World. I wanna go to Baldy World.
He wanna go to Body World, man.
He wanna go to Baldy World, so I hit him in his Baldy World.
Body World.
It's the Baldy World.
When we hit Baldy in his head, his spinning.
His spinning.
Dead looking like Baldy when we rolled up. Right or wrong? That bees like Lil Baldy.
Say it.
That bees like Lil Baldy.
Say the Baldy World.
What you call it, girl? I call it Baldy World. What you call it, girl? I call it Baldy World.
That be like
Double
Baldy.
bees on my belt buckle. Don't you know that's Baldy World? Baldy World.
He wanted to go to Baldy World, so we said to the Baldy World.
Man, you hit him in his Baldy World.
Hit him in his Baldy World. Now you up in Baldy World.
Baldy World, just sitting there at Baldy World.
Years later, the rapper Ruger from MOB would make fun of Baldy's death on the Exposing Me remix with FBG Duck. Over time, internet sleuths would create their own theories about specific killers, combing through any hint left by 600's enemies, with theories circulating that perhaps Lil B from EBT may have killed Baldy, while others theorized that it could have been Domo from MOB or Main from STL and Bebe, and it would even circulate that Baldy was allegedly killed with the very same gun as OD Perry was killed with, ultimately leading to the creation of O-Block. After a man was apparently arrested with this dirty gun in 2012, but it still was unclear whether or not he was involved in the crime or just bought the gun. The exact identity of the shooter of Baldy remains a much debated mystery to this day in Chicago gang folklore. But regardless of exactly who was responsible, for many members of 600, Baldy was their first close friend to be killed, and his death was a huge loss to the neighborhood. Therefore, to commemorate their fallen friend, 600 named their neighborhood and the gang Baldy World, and 600 would also make sure to keep Baldy's name alive, paying tribute to him in numerous songs, with 600 member LA Capone even getting a huge Baldy World tattoo on his stomach. In the years following Baldy's death, around his birthday and Death Day in July, 600 would celebrate his life on what they would call Baldy Day. Years after Baldy's death, FBG Duck would claim in his 2020 song Dead Bitches that when Baldy got killed, 600 were not standing on business, supposedly suggesting that 600 didn't even attempt to avenge his death. However, even though Baldy's murder remains officially unsolved to this day, 600 Breezy, who had witnessed the murder firsthand, has claimed numerous times, as early as 2014, that Baldy's killer is in fact dead. Ultimately, we might never know definitively who killed Baldy, but what is clear, however, is that Baldy was unfortunately only the first of many high-profile 600 members who would lose their lives throughout this period. As in September 2011, the streets of 600 would heat up as 3 young men would lose their lives to the streets in quick succession, starting off with the very person who was rumored to have killed Hottie in 2008. The violence in Chicago had been escalating since the beginning of summer 2011, leading to numerous deaths besides Baldy from 600. For example, the death of OD Perry in August, which would lead to Wick City renaming itself O-Block in his honor. In August, an anti-violence march was organized in the Englewood neighborhood to protest against the rising youth gun violence. But tragically, as that march was going on, yet another youth, 14-year-old boy, was shot and killed nearby. Perhaps because of all of these tragedies of young people losing their lives, in September, the older guys from the neighborhoods of 600, Jaro City, O-Block, and STL-EBT were rumored to have been negotiating a peace treaty between these gangs.
How many of y'all ever heard that there was a peace treaty between O-Block, 600, STL, EBT, Jaro City? Basically us versus them. Man, yup, long time ago. And in no way nor fashion would I believe that they was gonna let us roam free and do all this and do all that, but man, we actually had a peace treaty with them, and some of us actually believed it. Like my boy.
According to Tay 600, the younger guys didn't have any say in the matter, and after the peace treaty was called, they would walk down King Drive, which borders the neighborhoods of 600 and Jaro City, to see if the peace treaty was real after they heard that their ops were having a party nearby.
We really was trying to see, like, if this peace treaty was real. We was all total straps like that, but we just wanted to see, because like The ops was having a party on 62nd and King Drive in the Quadway, and I remember us walking up the drive. It was a late night. We was deep. It was basically my whole hood walking up King Drive.
According to Tay, that day, nearly the whole of 600's hood was out walking on King Drive, and eventually they would get to the party being thrown by Jaro City, where they would meet many of their former friends, who at this point were some of their worst enemies. These ops would have killed them on sight just a few weeks ago, but by some miracle, this confrontation would go down peacefully, and everyone would go home safe that night off the back of the peace treaty.
With each other, so it was crazy because this the first time we done seen each other face to face, and they had to like get into no shootout or nothing where it's like unfolding them. It's really have a peace treaty going on, so you looking at these who you was just supposed to be blowing at last week, and it's like, but none happened though. Nobody tweaked right then and there. We end up making it straight to the O. Made it back to their party. No cap.
According to Tay, D-thang was also there that night, and maybe it was that experience that actually made him let his guard down and stop carrying his gun in the streets.
I think that peace treaty hood up, because I think if it was busted, d-thang wouldn't have been on the one with no pipe. That peace treaty make them more. I think they could ease up, and then some food back door lane go on.
Because not long after this incident, on the 13th of September 2011, D-thang was at that very same street on the corner of 61st and King Drive. After buying a Pepsi from the corner store, D-thang, real name Devon Garner, was sitting in the backseat of a car with some friends when two gunmen would approach the car, one of them reportedly walking up to D-thang and yelling, "This is for Hottie," before beginning to shoot. D-thang would react quickly, exiting the car through the window in an attempt to escape, but one of the gunmen would unfortunately catch up to him, shooting him cold-bloodedly on the street. And once again, 600 Breezy would be right there to witness his friend getting killed, tweeting about the trauma caused by these events a few years later. Following D-thang's death, Young Famous would make a tribute song to him, which has since been deleted from YouTube.
So it's different because D-thang technically died in my arms, so it's different with me, bro. That's my real brother. Like, we used to go to parties and dance with take our shirt off and be rolling and freaking on part. Like, that's my real brother. Like, besides the savage that like Shorty was really like that, to sleep under a motherfucking porch and knock you down type. Like, he was one of them faces, savage, heinous. Like, but you would never look at him and think that, because he feel me, that he a good hearted. But for the that we had going on, he lived and died at 600. Like, crazy. I parked on the block, walked, like, we was good. We used to hang on 61st and King Drive, bro. Like, the stoves, we used to be right there type shit. So we just like the big, like my daddy and them, it went to that route. They made us call a peace treaty with Jaro City. Yeah. Like, so we thinking it's all good, but D-thang just treated the dome and tell them like, oh yeah, woo, and treat him while we having so he all right, shorty type. Like, and fool was, he wasn't no doing shit. So it's like, nah, it's two savages. Hey, they Nah, we thinking it's all good. I walked to the one I just shake up with, bro, all that shit. They did some weird shit. One came, let off a shot, took off running, made motherfuckers scatter, and some then food is happening, and they man, bro was super tough, bro. He ran up on food with that gun, bro. I heard the yell out like, "Don't run up on me, I'ma do your," and he ain't even do that. He shot backwards, gang. Like, he focused, D-thang was running up on him, finna beat him. I'm finna, cause he used to, you got this gun, steady waving his gun at me for 2-3 minutes, and you ain't blew this. I'm finna, and tried to run up on him, and the fool got to running and let off a couple shots that way. Hit D-thang like in his like, I think his artery in his leg and his like lower stomach type. So it's like, wow, I'm on the ground with him. I'm like, what the f? Like, you feel me? I can't even see where the blood coming from. So I patch him up, I get him, police come and snatch me off him, swing him over. Folks damn that down right there, arms that fell out. I'm like, yeah, this crazy. Like,
and like with Baldy, members of 600 still throw a party in D-thang's honor every year on his birthday. Meanwhile, 600's ops from MOB would almost immediately be on social media taunting them. However, there were also some other reactions, including one 051 member posting tributes to D-thang, as well as a member from Geo Drive, which was an indication that despite the war between 600, MOB and Jaro City getting deadly, 600 had yet to begin truly beefing with other sets like 051 Young Money, which would eventually become their mortal enemies. After the brazen assassination of D-thang, although the killers had once again again fled the scene without being captured, this time around, Chicago police would be on their heels since the very beginning, immediately being aware of d-thang's gang affiliations and likely the common enemies, as well as securing CCTV footage from a security camera of the corner store that d-thang had visited just moments before his death, which had captured the shooting. According to CPT's internal investigation reports, CPD would also conduct a buy and bust scheme on local crack dealers in order to receive more information on the homicide, and soon they would have several witnesses that told them that the killer was a man called Dome, who was a member of Jaro City. Not long after, Dome, real name Christopher Hughes, would turn himself into police custody, charged with the murder of d-thang. According to CPD's reports, Dome was in fact on parole at the time of the murder, and to make matters even worse for him, he was on electronic home monitoring, which showed that Dome left his house about 20 minutes before the shooting and returned only a few minutes after. Based on the brazen assassination style killing that took place in the middle of the day on a busy street, which Dome committed whilst on parole and being monitored, it seems like the killing of d-thang was a highly personal matter. Not only did the shooter allegedly say the murder was retaliation for Hottie as it was happening, but even in his mugshot, Dome can be seen with a large 600K tattoo on his throat with the O's illustrated as smoking bullet holes. Prosecutors would argue that the killing was motivated by revenge, and ultimately Dome would end up being sentenced to 20 years for the murder of d-thang. With it initially believed that he would be eligible for parole in just over half of the sentence in 2023, for the members of 600, the death of d-thang was devastating, as d-thang had not only been the founder of their gang, but also the biggest role model for many of the younger members. Years after his death, Tay600 would post a heartfelt message to his Instagram about d-thang that ended with him swearing that when Dome was released, they would kill him. 600 Breezy would also chime in, calling for Dome's release so that 600 members could get back and kill him. Breezy would post numerous times about the death of d-thang, taunting Jaro City, claiming that this is the only murder that they have committed. Undoubtedly, being known for such a high-profile murder, whilst also having 600K tattooed on your neck, would likely put a pretty big target on your back in prison. Tay600 had posted on Twitter that Dome had a target on his head in jail, in prison, where d-thang's brothers were also serving time. But in the end, 600 would not get the opportunity they wanted to avenge the murder of d-thang, because in 2021, only a few years before being eligible for parole, Dome would reportedly in prison. And looking at the mugshots of Dome from his time in prison, it was seemingly taking a heavy toll on him. But regardless of what happened to Dome, it was less than a week after the brutal murder of d-thang that 600 would go on to lose yet another prominent member, whose passing would ultimately end up impacting members of 600 for years to come. Lil Steve was the younger brother of Mimo 600, an original 600 member who's had success as a rapper over the years and even been associated with Lil Durk's OTF label as well as King Von. According to Tay600, 2011, Lil Steve had only lived in 600's neighborhood for about a year. However, in that short time, he would make a lasting impression on the other members. Apparently, despite his young age, Lil Steve had been getting into a lot of trouble in his old neighborhood, and to change his life trajectory, his mum decided to move the family for a chance at a fresh start. Unfortunately, Lil Steve would continue causing problems in the new neighborhood, and rather than his new friends being a positive influence on him, it would actually be Steve who would influence his new friends by teaching them how to steal phones and bringing guns to school at just age 13. Therefore, in 2011, when the war in the streets began heating up and the younger members of 600 started getting more active, it was no surprise then that Lil Steve would be at the forefront of the action. According to Tay, making the entire neighborhood scared of him by running around with guns and robbing people. Around the same time, a kid from the gang that 600 had beef with, Scrap from MOB, would move to 600's neighborhood too, directly opposite from where D Rose had lived. Scrap was the younger brother of the rapper Ruger and a cousin of the rapper FBG Duck, who had been involved in the streets since a young age. Perhaps Scrap's dad knew the danger his son was in after moving in the area. He would often approach members of 600, begging them not to kill his son.
Scrap moved to the hood. Now we got smoke. So Scrap daddy walked to our hood. And he kept doing this. He kept doing it often. Like, he'd do it often. Scrap daddy would walk to our block. We 13, 14-year-old shorties. He'd walk to our hood and beg us to not kill Lil Brian. He used to beg us to stop being a tour with Shorty and them. He ain't want Lil Brian to die.
However, the dad, who's also a well-known persona in the South Side called Big Les, would later deny any of that happening in an interview with 16 Shot and Visuals.
Man, bro, I'm from the streets. First thing I'm gonna do is try to talk to you. Be like, you know, leave my son alone. You know what I'm saying? But if I come to you as a man and say, man, you know, don't hurt my son. But I didn't say that, man. He make it seem like I came straight to them and said, please don't kill my son, man. I ain't coming to that man to say that, man. He know that. He know that. And then for one, I didn't even know who Tay was.
Whatever the truth is, Scrap would remain unharmed for the time being. However, according to Tay, after Baldy was killed later in 2011, Lil Steve wanted revenge. That night, Lil Steve would allegedly walk up to Scrap's house and unload his gun without care for who was inside.
He walked the Blood Bride crib, man, and put slugs in that motherfucker. He say, I don't give a f*** who with This Steve was crazy, man. He ain't get no.
Now, for the record, Big Les has denied this story, saying that Lil Steve was already dead when this alleged shooting happening.
Do you remember your house being shot up or something around that time?
When my house
Or
got
if you wanna discuss it.
when my house got shot at and got shot into, it was one shot.
Oh.
God rest his soul, Steve's soul. Steve was dead.
But whatever the case, on the 19th of September, only days after the death of d-thang, Lil Steve, real name Stephen McGee, was reportedly walking on the 6000 block of Prairie Avenue, the same street that Baldy was gunned down on, when a man passing by him would warn him of several guys with guns being gathered in the nearby alleyway. Unfortunately, someone would then appear from the alley and start shooting towards Lil Steve, hitting him twice, once in the head, ending his young life at just 15 years old. E-Day and 600 Breezy would later talk about that day on social media, mentioning that Lil Steve may well have been intoxicated while walking around, and that E-Day was one of the first people to see his lifeless body after the shooting. Tay600, on the other hand, would claim on his YouTube channel that Lil Steve had arrived at the scene with other members of 600, specifically because they had heard that the ops were there, and when the gunman appeared from the alley, Lil Steve would fearlessly yell at all the other members to shoot back while standing in the middle of the street. And once the smoke cleared on the shootout, Lil Steve was on the ground with bullets in his body.
Folks hit the corner, coming out the alley. Lil Steve was like the first who was like a little bit ahead of everybody, so when they seen Lil Steve, they instantly got the blowing. Now two of the guys that was with Lil Steve, they get for cover, but they got their pipes too. Now they tossing. Lil Steve never moved. Lil Steve was standing in the street, telling them, blow that, on milk, better blow that. While they blowing that, and while one of the guys tossing back at them, Lil Steve standing in the middle of the street, man, yelling, "You better blow that, you better." And when the dust settled, man, Lil Steve was in the street, had a neck shot.
And then, only a day after reporting on the death of Lil Steve, the newspapers would then report that a 14-year-old boy had been arrested and charged with his killing. That boy would turn out to be Scrap, and only a month after the death of Lil Steve, Chief Keef would drop his mixtape Bang, where he would rap on the song What I Claim about avenging Steve's death by doing a hit on Scrap's gang MOB. As Scrap was a minor at the time, there's very little information about his trial online, but what we do know for certain is that Scrap, real name Brian Weekly, would end up walking free, despite friends of Scrap like FBG Brick and FBG Butter claiming that members of 600 had testified against him.
Yeah.
Bite down, baby, for all them they Rondo, all of them got on the stand on Lil Brian after he killed Lil Steve.
After being acquitted, Scrap would constantly taunt Lil Steve on Twitter and hint at his involvement in his death, tweeting that they knew who made Steve drive, F Baldy, and Lil Steve, as well as saying that he's smoking on Lil Steve, and he would even acknowledge that Lil Steve had been trying to kill him, and that's why he had to act first, as well as implying in 2013 that he couldn't wait to kill Chief Keef next, who at that point was at the height of his career, but still living in Chicago. Lil Steve was the third member of 600 to be killed within just a few months, and despite him only living in the neighborhood for a short time, he had become a legend for many in the crew, which is clear from the amount of commemoration that he received after his death, with 600 naming their neighborhood Steve Drive, and many of the members still commonly using the saying, on Steve. MOB members would often post to Twitter claiming the murder of Lil Steve and Baldy, but unfortunately, the killing was far from done, and less than 10 days after the murder of Lil Steve, there would be another senseless killing in 600's territory. Jizzel was a member of Squirt Town, which was named in the honor of a man called Squirt, who had allegedly belonged to a gang that used to operate from the now demolished Randolph Towers before their destruction in 2004. Not much is known for certain, but allegedly, Big Squirt was killed in 2008, after which his friends honored his name by naming their neighborhood Squirt Town. The neighborhood around the 60th Street was also the home turf of Brick City and later 600, and the few remaining Squirt Town members had close relationships with 600, particularly Jizzel, who was a good friend of several members, as can be seen from his Twitter, where he would commonly mourn the losses of dead 600 members, Baldy, d-thang, and Lil Steve. But sadly, Jizzel too would end up suffering the same fate as his fallen friends, only about a week after Lil Steve's passing. On the 27th of September 2011, around 4:12 PM, Jizzel was reportedly walking down 60th Street when he would run into a group of men who would open fire, hitting Jizzel multiple times. Real name Carl Spencer, Jizzel would be hit in the head, shoulder, and abdomen, later passing away in Stroke Hospital. 600 had now lost 4 people close to them in just a matter of a few months, which is an unbelievable tragedy, even in a city like Chicago, where losing friends to gun violence has become completely normalized. Despite this being another brazen killing taking place on a busy street in the middle of the day, the killing of Jizzel would remain unsolved for years. However, that wouldn't stop the enemies of 600 talking about it on Twitter and sharing some highly personal information about his last moments, with prominent enemy of 600, TB, claiming that Jizzel had actually begged for his life. In 2018, friends of the alleged perpetrators would suddenly give statements to the police exposing them. According to these witnesses, Jizzel had been killed by 2 men from 2 different GD gang sets, Lil B from STL EBT and Tutu from Jaro City, who had had spotted Jizzel, ran him down, and shot him execution style while standing over his body. 2 days after the murder of Jizzel, Tutu was seemingly in good spirits, tweeting about being up early, repping 062, Jaro City's turf. Other ops would also imply that Tutu was one of the shooters, with one member tweeting that Tutu hit Jizzel. However, the alleged killers wouldn't get to face justice for their crimes, because by 2018, both of them had already lost their lives to gun violence in the streets. But more on that later, because as 2011 went on, despite September being a deadly and devastating month for 600 and their members, in the following month of November, one of 600's biggest enemies, 051, would end up losing one of their most prominent members too. Shortly after midnight on the 10th of November 2011, a member of 051 Young Money called T-streetz, real name Tariq Madhi, was driving on South LaSalle Street between Garfield Boulevard and 57th Street when somebody from another car would shoot at him. This caused him to drive off the road to a grass field where he would end up passing away from his injuries. There's many conflicting stories over exactly who was involved in this murder, with some believing this to be the first murder in the war between 600 and 051 Young Money. One theory suggests that d-thang's brother m-thing might have been who killed T-streetz as retaliation for his brother, but there's no evidence supporting this, and d-thang's killer Dome was actually from Jaro City. THF46 members would also make some incredibly self-incriminating posts regarding T-streetz, suggesting that they might have actually been responsible for this hit, with some posts suggesting that this may have been revenge for a murder that T-streetz committed on a 46 member named Tony. However, 051 members, on the other hand, would claim that T-streetz was in fact set up. One of their members would also point out how everybody was seemingly claiming to have killed him. King Von even referenced the murder of T-streetz in his track I Am What I Am, seemingly implying that he was indeed set up, even referencing the peace treaty like the one that seemingly preceded the murder of d-thang. Ray Rilla from O-Block also mentioned T-streetz in his song 23 Dead Ops. Ultimately, the murder of T-streetz was never solved, and intense debate continues online to this day, with multiple unproven theories on exactly who might have been responsible. However, interestingly, that very same day, another murder would take place, this time with it being a lot more obvious who was responsible. Less than 24 hours after the murder of T-streetz, on the night of the 10th of November, a member of Jaro City called Tutu, real name Carlton Archer, was found dead in an alleyway on the 6200 block of South Eberhart Avenue with multiple gunshot wounds. His body was lying less than a mile from Jizzle's death site, with the implication being that 600 had actually avenged Jizzel, killing his killer within 2 weeks of the murder. After his death, Tutu would become a legend in his hood and in the drill culture, and his friends have often mourned his death on social media. FBG Duck would take to Facebook that very same night, implying that he intended to avenge Tutu's death regardless of being on house arrest. STL member KI was also very close to Tutu and was even rumored to have been in a romantic relationship with him at one point. Taekwon World member TB also shared his grievances online, with it being believed that he jumped off the porch and got deeply involved in the streets immediately after Tutu's murder. Meanwhile, the death of Tutu was celebrated amongst 600 members, who continued to diss him on social media and insinuated that someone close to them had killed him. But C-Day from 600 would diss Tutu particularly hard, leading some to believe that it was him who was responsible for the crime. His Twitter activity after the murder shows the extent that he would go to mock Jaro City, seemingly admitting to being involved in the shooting, tweeting over a year after the murder that he would dig him up and re-kill Tutu. The night before this tweet, C-Day would also post claiming that he enjoys killing so much, and he even compares it to the feeling of sex. Many would theorize that his Twitter name, 22 Shots, or Tutu Shots, is in fact a play on words, referring to him being the killer of Tutu. Moreover, a rumor would start that C-Day and others had actually called FBG Duck right after the killing, which according to some, Duck would actually post on Facebook that his bro is dead only a few hours after Tutu was confirmed by the police to have been shot. But the theory that C-Day was responsible would become more likely as weeks went on. On the 28th of November 2011, just 18 days after Tutu's murder, Buka and C-Day, along with Rondo No. 9, would drop a music video for their song, Man Down. And in that song, C-Day raps that he catches people and leaves their bodies slumped like Tutu, and that Tutu got cooked and he was the chef. The disrespect being further amplified by the fact that C-Day took these lyrics from an old Facebook post of Tuka, who at the time had been dissing the ops of SDL, with C-Day simply switching the name Mo to Tutu. This video was one of the earliest examples of a 600 music video where members were rapping openly about the beef playing out in the streets, and in the comments it would be full of people amused at just how reckless C-Day was being with his lyrics about this specific murder. But the disrespect went far beyond music, and it's alleged that 600 members would even shoot up Tutu's funeral, with some tweets suggesting that people were even hit in the incident. This shooting was even seemingly confirmed by the pastor who held the funeral service, who would be so affected by it, it would prompt him to hold a 94-day-long vigil in a tent on the roof of an abandoned motel, in order to bring awareness of the senseless violence affecting his neighborhood, a life-changing experience that he would then write into a book. And one video has circulated seemingly showing Jaro City members mobbing on the day of the funeral and dissing their many ops.
Wait, what's up? We out here. What's up? What's up? We out here. Camaro, we out here. What's up? What's up? We out here. What's up? What's up? What's Put us out here, Shorty. On cheese, put us out here. On the air. We out here. You know, RP tutu. No.
FBG Butter actually mentions the funeral shooting in his interview with Corporate Cartel Media, admitting that it really happened, and claiming that Jaro members got locked in the church by authorities who were trying to take their guns.
Because look, you gotta think like this, right? Tutu funeral was on their right, at Pastor Brooks Church, right? It got blew at. It was a shootout, right?
At the funeral?
At the funeral. It got wild on their way going to the funeral. Bumped his, got wild, you know, right? Pastor Brooks let the police barricade us in his church.
Prominent Chicago YouTuber Trench's News would also discuss the funeral shootout in a video.
Tutu funeral actually was shot up. They stuck their hand through the old block gates and shot him, shot at the funeral. You know what I'm saying? And then the police, they end up grabbing all the guys from Tuckerville and STL, stretching them out, searching them. You know what I'm saying? After they got shot, after they came up under fire.
Ultimately, the war between 600 and Jaro City and their affiliates had reached boiling point in 2011. The 2008 murder of Hottie, allegedly by d-thang, had been the catalyst for these back-to-back killings in 2011, resulting in the deaths of Baldy, d-thang, Lil Steve, and Jizzel. 600 members seemingly had their revenge in the murder of Tutu, but this was only the beginning of a deadly war that would get more deadly and complicated as time went on. And with the murder of t-streetz from 051, now members from 600 have to look out for numerous gangs from different neighborhoods. And going into 2012, it would seem to be that the biggest threat would actually come from their newest ops, the gangster 051 Young Money, who over the course of 2012 would become infamous for both their violence in the streets and their brutality in drill music too.